Hello and welcome to GMI, the Guitar and Music Institute, podcast number 61. My name is Ged Brockie, and for, near on 7 years now, I've been creating this podcast. In this, the first podcast of 2025, I'm interviewing Liam Thomas. Liam comes from the United States, and he works for a major music company. But I'm kind of keeping that a little bit of a secret so you'll actually listen to the podcast. He's a very talented guitar player, and he has blended all his composing, his playing, his band work with this other career which is in the field of music. And what I will say, it's in publishing. If you publish music or have any kind of music, you would really want to listen to this because Liam is the go-to guy for publishing. If this is your first time listening to GMI, I would encourage you to go over to the gmiguitarshop.com and check out all the free goodies that are there, as well as paid items for guitarists of all ages, styles, levels, abilities. Without any further upfront chat, I'm going to hand you over to the interview now. Liam Thomas, how are you? Now, the first question I'm going to ask you is, do you know if you're in any way related to anyone in Wales with a name like Thomas?
I know at the moment, I don't really know. I know my family's really English, kind of from that part of Europe. My grandfather was off the boat from Liverpool. So I do have
Liverpool's very close to Wales, by the way. I don't know if you know that. And Thomas is an incredibly Welsh name. Everyone's called Evans or Thomas, or
Yeah, and I get lots of questions too about whether I'm Irish as well with having a first name like Liam. But it's English is really where my roots are.
Great. Okay, well, Liam, it's great to have you on GMI. Thanks so much for being part of it. And this podcast is about you, and dare I say the phrase that I hate saying, your journey. And where you are as a musician. Now, perhaps we are going to later on talk about a company, a massive company actually, you work for in music, but I want to leave that to one side. Could you maybe tell the listeners a potted history of just who you are without going into too much detail, and then we'll dive in?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Liam Thomas. I'm a guitarist and composer from actually Delaware in the United States, but I'm currently active in Pennsylvania, near the Philadelphia area. I studied composition in school for both my bachelor's and master's degree, while guitar was my primary instrument. So I did a lot of studying and playing guitar while also, working to become a composer and write for all sorts of different ensembles after I had kind of a background and start in like rock music is where I started. And then I kind of went into the classical world as I realized that I wanted to study music. And then as I finished those years in school and everything and being a composer, now I'm working in the industry a little bit, the sheet music industry, and working with composers, and while also still trying to gig and be a full-time musician while I get to work at, in the industry.
You've covered a huge amount of ground there. I'd just like to unpack that a little, as they say again. You've talked about classical music. Who were your big influences in terms of guitar players? Oh, and by the way, I just want to make it clear that when you talk about school, for anyone not in America, you're actually talking about university, aren't you?
Yes, university. I attended a state university in Pennsylvania called Westchester University. So guitar influences and heroes, for a while, like especially growing up, I was a big classic rock fan. I loved Led Zeppelin. I loved Jimmy Page. I really got into progressive rock. I was a big Steve Howe fan. A little bit of like the heavier side of things too. I was into Steve Vai. And then closer to like the end of high school, and getting into where I was going to college or university, I was really into an Australian guitar player named John Butler. He has a band called the John Butler Trio, and he was a major fingerstyle guitar player that played in a lot of open tunings. And I was getting into that world, and at the same time being in school, I that's where I kind of started to be like, well, guitar is my instrument, and I need to be able to do classical music. So then I started to get into classical guitar, and I think one of my biggest influences for classical guitar, because again, there's so much repertoire out there and classic composers that I still haven't studied and looked into, even though I played a little bit of their music. But Jason Vio, who is a classical guitar player who teaches at Curtis, which is a music conservatory in Pennsylvania. He did master classes at my university, and listening to him play Bach and all these other composers and arrangements for classical guitar, he definitely was an influence for me. And at the same time, I studied with a guitar player named David Cullen. He was a massive influence on me. I mean, I studied with him for 4 long years. So,
wow. So how long was your total study time on classical guitar?
Focusing on classical, it was about 3 years. And then in my 4th year of university, I did a lot of jazz. Even though I was playing kind of in a classical ensemble, we did a lot of jazz tunes, and I wanted to kind of round myself out as a guitar player, because I wasn't necessarily there to become a classical guitarist. I was there to become a composer, and I really wanted to have as much exposure to everything that I could. And then after that, throughout grad school, I studied, or for a year in grad school, I studied. So I'd say about 5 total years I did a study on guitar in both the classical and jazz worlds.
What was your background? Do you come from a family that is musical, Liam? What was the driving force for you, or is it just something that you picked up?
So my family wasn't a big family of musicians. They appreciate music. They love music. My dad in particular was a big, just all the bands that I grew up listening to came from him. You know, all the classic rock bands like Yes and Led Zeppelin and all the bands that got me into guitar. My older brother was a musician. He played a bit of guitar, and then actually ended up becoming more of a singer. So he's a vocalist now. But I got a lot of influence from my older brother. And then the music influences, like what I listened to, came from my dad. But then after that, it was just I started taking lessons. My parents were really encouraging in that way. They were completely okay with me wanting to dive into the world of music.
Let's be honest, it's a difficult kind of way to make a living, but they were very supportive in whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah, they, you know, there were other times too as a kid that I wanted to do other things, like, you know, play sports or things like that. And they were okay with that too, but they were really like, you have something here, you should pursue music. So they were always really almost, you know, the encouragement was so strong that I was so excited to always be doing something music related. And that's how I got into the world of rock and things like that.
Were you in bands in school? Did you do live performance there?
Yeah, towards later high school, I was playing in my own rock bands where we wrote original music, but also throughout like my teenage years, basically from 13 onward. I've been playing since I was 7 years old, and I'm 26 now, so I've been playing for a good amount of time. And about when I became a teenager, I started to do the School of Rock, which has become this kind of national thing here in the States. And I don't know if they have international influence, but it's basically a performance. It's a school where you take lessons and things, but it's also a performance program where you learn and you get to play cover songs and play in a band, basically. So, you know, I was a part of that program, getting exposed and playing all the music that I loved and grew up listening to.
Is School of Rock an offshoot of the film then?
They got their title, like the name of the company and the organization. They got it from that because, you know, that movie was so, you know, big and influential for, I guess, you know, young student musicians picking up guitar and drums and playing rock music.
Yeah, we can't underestimate how, you know, other mediums can. I mean, that must have had a massive, massive effect on young people around the world, seeing that and thinking, I'd like to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's still one of my favorite movies. I love watching that movie and seeing, you know, all the kids like, you know, get up on stage and finally get to play. I mean, that's what I wanted to do, watching that movie and then, you know, taking lessons too. I wanted to get up on stage and play.
I've actually been asked back for some bizarre reason to be a judge at a school, a local school in the city I work in, and yeah, I just think it's really good because there seems it's so easy nowadays to not do anything other than just digital looking at screens. And just whether they're good or they're bad, and they're mostly good, it's great just to see that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's wonderful. And, you know, there's always something, you know, with all the digital age and everything, there's still really nothing that beats live music. I mean, you can't beat it. You can't beat going in any medium. It doesn't matter, classical, rock, whatever it is. You get up and you see people play their hearts out and create the art themselves and present it to you, even with all of its sometimes not perfect. And that's what live music is, and that's what people want to see, and it's great.
In keeping with what we want to talk about in this, which is, focusing on you and how things develop for you, at what point did you think, I want to get really serious about this? And for anyone listening out there who might really love playing their instrument, what do you think are the things they need to think about before actually embarking on something like, I want to go to university to study this?
For me, I was a kind of a late teenager, maybe 16, like approaching the time where I had to decide what I wanted to study in college or university. And at that point, like when I was 16, 17, I was like, well, I haven't really I was okay in school. I got decent grades and everything, but there was nothing that really spoke to me like music did. So of course, that's when I was like, well, I'm going to go and prepare for an audition and do the classical thing because I want to continue to study this. And then on top of that, as I went through school, I mean, especially for the first few years of, that transition period and then starting college and everything, I really wasn't thinking too much about what am I going to do when I get out of here? Am I going to be and then that really doesn't hit you until you're getting close to graduating. At least it didn't for me. And then that's when I started to kind of that early college period is when I started to teach lessons, because I was kind of like working part-time jobs and while I studied music and working in coffee shops and things like that. And then I kind of was like, well, I have a skill here. And I had so much encouragement from like my peers around me at school and my teacher. Like I mentioned before, David Cullen, he was really encouraging. And he was like, you just have to jump into it and you can start teaching. This is a great thing that you can do. Kids want to play guitar. And that's kind of how I started a little bit of, starting a career in music, I think is through teaching. And I still teach today and I'm learning new things. And it really gets me to feel like I have an impact on the world when I'm playing guitar and teaching these students. So I think that's a great outlet. If you play an instrument, there are people who want to learn how to do it. And that's going to lead into my next point a little bit. I think this might be a good transition point. I think as musicians too, it's something that I accepted as well. And it's okay to work in other places and do other things besides just I was a composer. I studied composition. I started to realize this is a hard thing to get into and do if I really want to just do this full time. But teaching and trying to find work and gigs, playing live music for just, even if it's not songs that you necessarily love, but people want to hear, and you're playing in restaurants or coffee shops, whatever it is, it's become a thing where I've noticed that having lots of places where I can make my living is great. And that's the way to do it as someone who really wants to pursue guitar and music all the time. I'm really doing it because I love it too.
They have this phrase in the conservatoire over in Glasgow about what is it? A portfolio. That's the word to use. A portfolio of income. Because, you make something from performance, something from teaching, something from composition. Can I just pick you up on the composition thing? And also, can I just first of all ask you about performance opportunities in America? What is that like nowadays? Is it difficult to actually get gigs?
It depends on the area that you live in. I think because when I say gigs and things, I did a lot of acoustic gigs where I kind of would play lots of cover songs, and I would have my iPad full of chord charts that I would use and have the same set lists and change it every once in a while and play 3-hour gigs in restaurants or bars or coffee shops, whatever it was. And the gig opportunities are great. I mean, you want to find places that are willing to work with you and support you, and not try to I don't even know what the word is, but
Rip
find
you
places
off.
that really, yeah, I guess that's a good way of that, a harsh but true way of putting it. But, there's plenty of places that they want live music. They need it. And you just go in and ask or cold email. I mean, and I said it was a little bit difficult depending on the area because I live in a particular town that it was a little bit, I still haven't really gigged in that town. I go to the places around it, and it's just because they have so many restaurants and places in one spot that like all the musicians are playing there, and you either have to know somebody or because their stuff or their schedules are packed with musicians. So you either have to sub in or like ask, know somebody or play in somebody's group. But there are plenty of opportunities and there are plenty of places that are willing to take you on, especially if you can show that you've put in the work to play the music.
Now, so for anyone out there listening, you talk about composition. I mean, how on earth explain to people how composers might make some money these days? How do composers make a living?
Well, there's lots of different ways that you can. I mean, again, composition is in its own world of, having that portfolio of income. I think because there's so many different ways that you can, kind of get your music out there and have people use your music in some way, so that they can compensate you for it. There's sheet music, which is kind of what I do today. You can look for, it's getting the TV and film gigs where, you're working with a director and they pay you to write the music for it. Those gigs are very few and far between. And if you're willing to seek them out and work really hard at it to go and meet people and find the right people to do it, those gigs are out there. I've certainly tried.
Do you think it's getting harder now with AI?
In some ways, yes, I think. And it's just because, so many directors and in that world, at least, are working with a budget, a low budget or no budget at all, that, they can just go pull something from a library or use AI. I mean, AI music, you can tell in a lot of ways that it's AI, but that's my next point of the libraries. I know I've attempted that in a way too. There are plenty of places that you can find online all over the world that they have a place for you to send your music and they will take it and promote it for you, or it's just a marketplace where you can sell your tracks. These are all places that I've looked. So libraries is another way to go. You can research that a little bit if you're interested. It's you have to have the recording skills and be able to produce your own tracks. And then to my first point that I mentioned, the sheet music too. If you're a composer, the educational music world is huge, and it's evergreen. It's constantly out there. There's always new students looking to play music. So if you're willing to arrange some of the music that you've created for an educational ensemble, a string orchestra, a concert band, a choir, that's really where you can make some additional income from your music, even if it's not the first place that you intended it to be. I mean, I know like all through university, I was writing for ensembles that I could write for. So like string quartets and, these strange, like kind of mixed matched ensembles, maybe a French horn here, a piano here. But those ensembles, the common ones are going to be the concert bands, the choirs, string orchestras, at least here in the States. And especially after I've gone to some conferences and seen some things, like those are definitely the biggest ensembles. And I know this is a guitar driven podcast, but guitar music is out there too. There's plenty of, and the guitar music programs in the US are growing as well. I mean, that's if you can try to find ways to arrange your music for guitar quartet or guitar anything. I mean, and then if you can basically make your music multi-purpose, I think that's where you'll find most success.
I think that you're really onto something there, because for years the only real duo out with mainly classical was the Bill Leavitt stuff for Berkeley. I mean, that was the sort of the main stuff that was out there for people. So we're going to come on to the company you work for, but before we do that, I just want to ask you about. You said you were really into rock, the usual suspects, like we all were. but then you went to study classical, and am I right in saying that you're now into actually back at playing heavy rock, metal music? So what was the classical thing about, really? Did you feel that that was something you had to do in some way, or was it the only program that was available where you were?
That's a big part of it. At least at first, I knew that I had to choose either classical or jazz, and I was really into fingerstyle guitar at the time. I was playing, like I mentioned, John Butler was a big influence on me. He's an Australian guitar player that had really long nails and would play on an acoustic 12 string and did lots of crazy guitar instrumentals and things like that. And I was just playing, even though I was playing on a steel string, like I was playing that fingerstyle stuff. And then I really was like, I had a band director too from high school that was really encouraging. And he was like, I'm going to get you into this. We're going to do this thing, and you're going to study music. And I was like, okay, I'm all for it. I went into it with an open mind, but I knew it was something that I had to pick up in order to pass an audition for college, for university. So once I got into it, though, I loved it.
Has it been of much use technically for you, though, Liam?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I'm always like all my students, I like to split up my lessons and I teach privately. I still teach rock music and everything, but I like to split my lessons up into thirds or so, like half-hour lessons, 10 minutes on reading music, 10 minutes on your scales. And if they're advanced enough, working on a little bit of classical technique, and then, finishing the lesson with, you're working on this guitar solo, this David Gilmour guitar solo on Comfortably Numb, whatever it is. And, but my roots are there, and I came out of university like with plenty of guitar skills, and I still have all my guitar music, and it has definitely helped me. I can read music great for the guitar. Finger picking is so natural. Yeah, definitely, especially for repertoire, or when I'm looking at a method book, I can tell what method books are good because they just, I don't have to handwrite or tab out exercises when there's plenty of repertoire that has it, because I can read, I can encourage my students to read the music. And then, finger picking is just second nature now. And that's such an easy thing it definitely had its uses. And also it really is true in a lot of ways that if you can play some of that difficult classical repertoire, whether it's, Barrios Mangore, if you're playing Bach arrangements, or if you're playing, Villalobos, if any of these, classical guitar composers ring a bell, but you can really play anything. There's few techniques out there that you won't be able to pick up after studying classical guitar. I think the only thing that I didn't pick up until recently, now that I'm playing heavy metal, is sweep picking, and that's, has its uses here and there, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to just reveal, in a sense, to the people that you work for a company, and it's a massive company, which I only found out about last year, called JW Pepper. Now, tell us about JW Pepper, what it does, and tell us how you got involved in it, because you work with them full on, don't you?
Yeah, it's my full-time job here. While still teaching, I teach at nights. Private teaching happens at night, so this is what I do pretty much full time during the day. JW Pepper is a sheet music retailer. So what we do is we distribute music all across the world. We have the largest network for sheet music distribution. We sell to K through 12 schools, churches, colleges, universities, community ensembles, you name it, whatever. If you're listening in the States and you have either you yourself are in school in music class, or you have children that are in music, they probably have gotten their music from JW Pepper at some point from their school. And it's really a great place where, like I said, largest network, composers get their music through there, whether it's with a publisher or with the section that I work in, which is called the MyScore platform, which is independent publishing for composers.
So maybe you could tell us, Liam, a little about that, and also how did you get the job, and how JW Pepper have had to changed the way they interface with the world because of everything that's happened over the last 20 years in the internet and digital workspace.
Yeah. And believe it or not, I've only been at JW Pepper for the last 7 months or so. Since last summer of 2024. But we've really gotten to the point where it's almost all online. We have a huge website where people can just browse their music and purchase it online. We still do catalogs and things like that. But the way that I got the position, it really, I was looking for work after I finished my master's degree, graduate school, and just looking in different places, applying here and there. I applied to a couple other places that it really was like a shot in the dark. I kind of just threw my resume out. But then I found this kind of on, JW Pepper were hiring through. I mean, they had a whole network of where they were highlighting the role, but I found it on LinkedIn, and I just applied for it, and it almost was. I was quite lucky that the position was open right out of graduate study, because I was studying composition, and they needed someone who was going to work with composers and travel to places to meet composers and help composers promote their music and sell their music. So that's really what I'm doing. I'm basically, I'm the lead person on this MyScore platform, which is a place where composers they don't have to work with a publisher. As long as they have PDFs and, recordings and things like that, they can put their music on our website if they sign up for MyScore and start selling their music and, find ways to make additional income. So
is MyScore a recent thing with JW Pepper?
It has actually been around for a little while. I believe the first year was 2012, which is well before I started. But it really has grown into something that it's in its own world. It's, the whole self-publishing industry, the independent publishing industry. Composers are learning how to put scores together and create scores, especially that's what I did. And, when I studied composition, we learned how to make scores look good, becoming a new thing. A lot of composers are just independently publishing their music.
So, Liam, what do you find companies like MuseScore a threat to JW Pepper, or is that something, a model almost, that you may go down the route of? Because I see that Hal Leonard was actually bought up by MuseScore.
Yeah, Muse Group did purchase Hal Leonard. But MuseScore, and there's a couple different things that come into that. I know MuseScore is a website as well where you can find sheet music, but MuseScore, there's a notation software that is a great resource for composers, really, because I don't see it as a threat to MyScore in a way that all notation software is great. Any resource that composers are able to create music and distribute it through us is wonderful. But we distribute everything, not just independently published music. We distribute music from we distribute music with Hal Leonard. We distribute music with Alfred Music Publishing. All MyScore is another place where composers can, if they're not getting published by these major publishing houses, or they're just getting started, or maybe they are a big name composer and this piece in particular just didn't get picked up by a publisher, MyScore is a place where they can put it and sell it.
So is MyScore non-exclusive to people? Let's say there's someone out there who's listening to us and they've got a whole bunch of their own music that's arranged. Can they put it on MyScore and it's not an exclusive deal?
Yes, absolutely. MyScore is completely non-exclusive. You're free to upload it to any other sheet music distribution network or website, whatever it is. If your own website, I'm sure, is a great place for you to have your music. So yeah, you'll keep the copyrights, and we have a royalty rate. Even though we're non-exclusive and you can keep your copyrights, we will print your music for you, and any print items will get 25% royalty of whatever the price is listed at, and then digital is 50-50. So you're distributing it through our network, and you're splitting the cost with us in a way as we distribute your music. But plenty of composers have great success with it.
So what you're saying is that if someone puts their music up, they can get it printed as well as it being delivered digitally. Is that correct?
Yep, absolutely. So we have a whole printing network. We have houses in Atlanta and Salt Lake City, where we print and distribute people's music. And with MyScore, it's strictly print on demand. So you send us PDF files, and if your music is purchased, then we will print it for you. We don't take stock, which I know that some composers do have a good amount of stock of their own music, but as long as you have PDF files, you can do it. And then the other thing is, at this time, we don't take anything that's copyrighted. We don't have, the licensing for that. So if you can provide us with a license that shows you can distribute it, then it's a conversation we can have. But we're pretty much exclusively original music and public domain arrangements.
People listen to this podcast all around the world. They might not necessarily just be in America. What happens if they want print on demand in other countries? What happens there, or is it not available outside of America?
No, it is available to everybody. We'll still print it from the States, but we have a shipping network. We'll be able to ship your music wherever it needs to go. Yeah, there's no issues with it. We have composers from all over the world signed up for MyScore.
That is absolutely fascinating. So, Liam, what is your job in a way? Because with a lot of these aggregation networks, it's like you can't hear anything other than the white noise. How do people actually get their music noticed above everybody else, or the usual suspects?
Well, with MyScore, you really are your own marketing. You own everything. You want to market it, you want to promote it, and you want to do as much as you can with it. So outside of putting it on the MyScore service and the platform and our website, you'll want to promote it as much as you can through social media or whatever it is, your own website. But at the same time, I am the lead person for MyScore. I'm the primary consultant. Keeping a relationship with me is great. You can email us at myscore@jwpepper.com with any of your questions. You can email them. And also, lately, I've really been working with composers to try to make their music the best that it can be. Have a good recording, have good cover art, have good engravings, so that I can get it over to I'm really the person who's going to be able to get it over to our editorial team, who promote things and create catalogs. And so I am your person to keep a relationship with, because right now I'm working with, we have such a huge team here at Pepper that does so much for the sheet music world that, and I'm here to help the composer and the MyScore and this independent publishing, that I'm here and willing to work with composers.
You're the connection between that. That's incredible. So, Liam, just a couple of questions now. Thanks so much for taking the time, because I know you're uber busy right now, but a daft little question. What is JW Pepper? Where does that come from?
Sure. So JW Pepper comes from the the name of the original owner of the company, back from the company was founded in 1876. So we're approaching 150 years being around. So it stands for James Welsh Pepper, who originally owned the company.
Okay, there's that Welsh thing coming in there, but it's probably a different spelling. Yeah, and on that Pepper, why was everyone called stuff like that? Like Barnum and Pepper back then. But anyway, that's another story. It seems to me that JW Pepper's great strength is the fact that it goes into schools and churches and places like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I think this is a great resource for composers who are looking to make more income from their music. It's a great place for them to look, because it's, like I said before, it's an evergreen market. There will always be students who need new music and they're going to come in and they're going to play your music. There's always going to be those ensemble seats getting switched out and people moving on, like the students moving on to upper levels and new students coming in. So there's always going to be those K through 12 ensembles. There's always going to be those church ensembles and those community ensembles and those universities, right? So we distribute to all of them, and there will always be a place for your music in the sheet music world.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to end our podcast interview by asking about your plans for the future, because you're playing a lot of heavy metal music just now. Do you have any plans? Are you in a band? Do you have anything coming up that the folks would like to know? And also, do you have a website or any albums out or anything like that? Tell us a little about all of that.
Sure. So I play in a heavy metal group at the moment. We're called Obsolescence. That's spelled Obsolescence. I know it's a lot of letters, but there's so many people who struggle to spell it. And, since we're not the largest band in the world at the moment, it might be a little bit hard to find. So we're constantly working. We're going to put out a new single here in a couple weeks on all the streaming services. And we're also in the midst of working on a debut album. So that's going to be coming within the next year. Yep. And then on top of that, I throughout grad school, I was working on I was recording my own album as my thesis. And it's a solo project that I did, and I'm working on putting that out on all streaming services and promoting it as much as I can. You can find me on all the streaming services.
Do you have a website, Liam?
I don't have my own personal website at the moment. Again, I'm still just getting started too as a composer and as a musician. We do have my band has a flow page. You can go flowpage.com/obsl.pa. And then on top of that, you can go find my MyScore profile, which has all of my links at the moment. So that's another cool thing about MyScore too, is that you get a public facing profile that you can use as a website if you wish. So you can find all my links and everything at jwpepper.com/myscore/Liam Thomas Music.
Well, we'll definitely have that up on the guitarmusicinstitute.com website, on the actual podcast page. Liam, thanks so much. I know you're incredibly busy. Thanks so much for taking time out your day. It's early there. It's a wee bit later here. And there's, as I said to you earlier, there's a storm coming. So I'm just glad it hasn't come and smashed into Scotland yet. But thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure and absolutely amazing that we're getting the news to people out there if they don't already know about J.W. Pepper as well as your flourishing career.
Thanks so much, Jed. It was an absolute pleasure. Stay safe in that weather, and I'm happy to have to be here with the Guitar Music Institute.